So about a year ago, I posted a video on a mid-range mix check EQ trick. If you haven't checked out this video, I would recommend doing so. I'll make sure I put a link in the info card above, either this side or this side. Can't remember which one. The reason I wanted to revisit this is because A, it's gotten a decent amount of positive feedback. I still get comments on this, people saying that they find this useful. The other thing is this is actually something that I use this every day. I use this if I'm producing. I use this especially when I'm mixing. I don't want to repeat anything that I've already talked about, so we'll kind of go over the basics and then I'll just move on to the use case that we're talking about it with in terms of today. Now the concept is simple, that I want to find a way to basically emulate the ability to bounce out something and listen to it on a mobile device. You immediately hear things like that. If you've parallel compressed your drums, it's too loud, the vocals are too loud, a certain element, maybe like a bass that the mid-range doesn't cut through. It's a really useful tip. But something kind of magical happened one day when I was listening through an EQ, because I didn't want to bounce it out and send it to my phone. I was listening through an EQ, and when I engaged the EQ, it was automatically just way too abrasive because it just sounded like somebody was, patched in my mix through a telephone, which is essentially what they did. But I immediately hit the dim button on my monitor controller, immediately. And when I did that, it was the smoothest transition for me where it no longer sounded jagged, it no longer sounded abrasive, it no longer sounded painful. But I was able to discern, in that particular case, I was able to discern that there was something that I was listening to that was too loud in the mix. And I was able to hear that very easily. And I was able to hear that differently with the 15 dB dim that I hit than if I just did a basic A-B and listened to the full range mix and then a pinched version. I'm sure if you gave me some time to listen between the two or something, that maybe I could work it out, but my brain couldn't do the math instantly. But my brain could do the math, and my brain could make smart mixing decisions when I brought the level down. So basically there's two different levels that I work with. The first one is, let's open this Pro Q3. You'll see that this is -15. I basically set this up the day that I discovered this, and I never changed it, and then I made it into like a template, something that I bring in terms of an effects chain. And this is run in combination, obviously, with my room correction software that I'm running for my iLouds. And then once I do that, then it goes into this plugin over here. Now, this is what I listen to when I'm listening to my main speakers, but we can do the exact same thing with a stock EQ. In this case, Pro EQ3. Notice I'm doing the same thing, right? 400 hertz, we get a 24 dB filter for our low cut or our high pass filter. And then on the top end at 5K, 24 dB, same thing. I'm filtering out just a mid-range. Now, in addition to filtering out, I'm applying a gain compensation where I've turned the gain down by about 8.5 dB. I find that anywhere from let's say, 8 to 10 dB when I'm working on headphones, specifically closed back. It might be a little bit different with open backs, but that is a gain reduction or a gain compensation amount that helps me make better decisions. Okay, so that's the basics. I already went too much into detail than I wanted to, but let's listen to these drums over here. I'm going to solo them out. Actually, let's listen full range. Okay, some cool sounding drums. We'll listen to them in context of everything. Okay, let's go back into solo. I am now going to take out the parallel compression. Let's bring it back in. Okay, this stuff is sometimes really, really hard to hear. Let's bring in our 1176 again, and this time I'm going to take out my dry signal. This is the compression. This is what I'm adding. Okay, what are we doing with this signal? Well, we have this awesome thwack. We have an energy. We have this kind of pumping vibe that goes with the groove, and it enhances the groove. Basically, the way that I think of groove is if I start listening to something and bobbing my head and moving my shoulders while I'm mixing, I know I'm headed in the right direction. When I'm not doing that, it feels rigid, it feels a little bit stiff. This is one of the reasons I use parallel compression too. If we listen to something that's really dynamic and we're not doing a ton of compression on it, when we listen loud, it sounds amazing. But then the minute you hit the dim button or you play it at a lower level and you play it with something that's been commercially done, notice that we just completely lose all the energy. We lose the vibe. this is a great place to dial in your parallel compression, or why parallel compression is useful. Now here's the deal. When I'm dialing in parallel compression, I like to do that usually with my speakers because it excites my room at a certain level, 72, 76 dB SPL, slow response, center weighted. I think it's C. It is just in this room that works for me. And if I can make the mix work at that level, and it excites my room a certain way where the low end translates, the mid range and the top, everything just works. So I know, and I monitor and I make sure that I'm mixing at that level. But when I go over to headphones, it's a little bit harder for me to decide. When you watch somebody who's really good at dialing in parallel compression, the general idea is that they bring it in, they dial in their compression. Sometimes they have it set exactly like they like, and then they just push into it until they get the vibe that they like. So let's try that. The basic rule we would follow is push it up till we can hear it and pull it back a bit. Definitely hear it there. Pull it back a bit. Okay, now let's bring it in and out. Okay, becomes a little bit hard to hear. Sometimes it's a little bit more drastic. The reason that it's hard to hear in this case is because I already have a lot of this drum room mic over here, this particular track. It's really dirty, and I'm punishing that, and I'm actually not doing any compression on this. This is the way this was tracked, but I'm pushing a lot of level of this into the actual drum mix. So it does become a little bit harder to discern. Now, when I'm having any issue with trying to make something work, or I'm not sure how to fine tune it, I can usually get it to within a couple dB. But 2 dB can be way too loud. Now, I don't want to go to the car or send something to a client and then realize that it's too loud. So in these cases, that's where I use this tip, where I listen through an actual EQ with this gain compensation. It could be on a set of headphones, could be on whatever. Now let's take a listen. Did you hear that? The minute I brought in the parallel compression, that snare just popped right out. Also, we heard a difference with the kick. Let's listen again. Okay, I could immediately hear that there's a drastic difference between that. But let's listen in context of the full mix, right? We're going to bring it out. Okay, I like the snare being loud. That snare is a really integral part of the groove, but I can tell you that it's at least a couple dBs too loud. Okay, so we're at minus 7.3. I know that we were parked at minus 10 when I opened this session. I know that's where I left it off at, so it's not quite fair. But let's put it back to that figure, or let's start pushing this a little bit. Here we're at minus 9.9. Let's listen to the before and after. This is kind of how I judge where a mix is going. If it's at a lower level, am I still excited about it? I can tell you that if I was pumping this thing out at 85 dB SPL in this room, that it, no matter if it was boring or not, it would sound exciting because that would be really freaking loud. But it'd be too loud to mix in this room. But if I can get this working where if I hit the dim switch and I'm listening to it and it still sounds exciting, then we're heading in a good direction. Now, this trick over here that I use to kind of help myself focus in on hearing things in isolation a little bit better, and the magic is in the mid-range. You know, the low end has to hit, the low end has to hit, has to thump, the high end's got to be sparkly, but the mid-range is so important. So if I can get this dialed in as close as I can, I will immediately hop over and then tweak it. So the interesting thing is I will usually land within a couple dBs of either direction. It's usually that I've overdone it, and I could probably say as a general rule of thumb to push it to where I like it in terms of where I like my parallel compression sitting, where I think it feels exciting. And then in that case, if I'm working like this with the splitter, that ended up being at -7, then to immediately, you know, turn it down a couple dBs because I've probably overdid it a little bit, because I always overdo a little bit. That's what I first of all like, and then I just pull things back a bit, and then it gets in line. But I think that this particular tip is very, very useful to help dial that in because it makes it easier You can really hear it in context with everything. The other thing is, when we make these moves, they all add up together and they're a little thing, and the balance changes. The balance completely changes. When I bring this in, we're listening to a kind of like a focused, spotlighted version of this that's with mid-range, but there's a lot of low end. And also I'm pushing some low end here. I'm pushing it with the Oxford, and then I'm doing a little bit of cleanup just here. See, we lose that excitement. But like I said, much easier for me personally to dial this in when I'm listening within a pinched version of the mix, that it really just kind of, it really helps for things to stand out, whether they're good or bad. So I would never mix through this. I would never mix that way where I'm mixing everything that way, but it is always one of the first things I do when I need to check something to make sure that the moves and the decisions that I've made are translating for the better. Anyways, that's it for this video. I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.